You're listening to Unfiltered, real talk about sex and love with Ashley
and Heather. And today we are talking about mom life. And this is actually going to be our first two-part series in this. Today we're going to be talking about mom life as a betrayed mom. And then in our next episode, we're going to be talking about mom life as the mom who struggles with addictive behaviors.
Yeah, this is so hard. You and I have both been here where you have to deal with real life. And whether it's you've been a betrayed mom or you're struggling with your own addictions or there's been a death in the family or divorce or you still have to parent. And
Right.
It's so difficult. And so we want to talk today just even about like how much do we tell our kids and all of those things that are struggles when we've been a betrayed mom. The first question I have is, since discovery, I can't seem to function like I did before. I'm crying 1 minute and angry the next. How long will this last? I can't say. I love when somebody asks a question, we're like, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But you know what? There's health in saying that. I don't know the answer to that. There's not a certain timeline, but what I would say is it doesn't last forever. If you work on it and you process this and you actually are intentional about healing from this trauma, you can get back to experiencing joy in your day, regardless of your outcome with your marriage or what your spouse is doing. We can get back to that place to be that happy mom where you're not consumed. And shortly after John's disclosure, after I found him out, it was just so sad to be a parent because all day long, my head is spinning with thoughts of betrayal and pain and why wasn't I good enough and where is he and why isn't he answering my call and is he going to work on himself and who can even help us with this? It was all consuming for me. And I was completely like my body was there with my kids, but my mind wasn't there. And I was so emotional that I just would cry at the drop of a hat. Sometimes I would lash out on them because I was just depleted and I didn't have any tools to figure out how to articulate what I was feeling or what I needed. And what I found was they needed me to give them something, they needed me to be able to tell them like, I am really having a hard day right now. And so let me know what you need, but we might just order pizza tonight, or we might not go to the park. Is that okay? And in some ways with my littler kids, I've said, when you've had a really hard day at school because some friends have been mean to you, or you've gotten in a fight with your brother and maybe you don't feel like doing the same things you normally do. That's kind of how I'm feeling right now. So it might look a little different, but I love you. And we'll make this work. We'll figure it out. And I'm still here, but just know like, that's why I'm in my head. That's why I'm crying. It's not you.
Yeah, which is really good and an important part of this process, because I remember on days where I would be that person just crying, just at home crying. And if I didn't communicate with my kids, they would sometimes think that it was them, that I was crying because they had done something wrong, or, that they were the reason why I was crying. And so I had to be really intentional to say, you know what, mommy is just sad today and I love you and this is not about you and you make me so happy, and, and really try and combat that, because I think that with kids, they don't really know the extent of what's going on. And sometimes they don't necessarily need to know all of the details, but it's helpful to just be able to communicate and say things out loud in a way that they're going to understand based on their age. But it is really important, because I know that even with going through my divorce, only one of my divorces.
I was going to ask. This is a whole other podcast.
Right. No, going through my divorce, I had to just recognize the way that it was impacting my kids, and not only that their dad wasn't there anymore, but my emotional health was going to impact my children. And so just taking responsibility for that when I recognized it, I think was really helpful in that process.
Right. And if let's say your marriage ends up where your spouse is not going to do the work or not going to get healthy, and now you find yourself being a separated or single mom, you may want to sit down with your kids if they're at the age where they can communicate and say, what can I do for you with all this change? What are the things that I need to do for you to help you as much as I can? What would help you feel more safe? What would help you feel more secure? What can I keep the same for you? What can I do? Because I remember you talking about your boy is being kept in the same school. And so they would drive further
Yes.
to a different, to a school in another town. And so that made me think like, if that's not a change that they need to make, then if you're in a situation where it's like, if you can go the extra mile literally to like drive your kids to keep them in the same school or continue to take them to the same church, even though you've moved out of the area, things like that. Like what would they want to keep doing, even if their circumstance has to change?
Yeah. Yeah. That is really important because too much change and not enough communication about what's going on can be really damaging in the long run for kids. So the next question we have is, as a betrayed mom, what steps can I take to begin healing and ensure I don't take out my pain on my kids? And again, that is really one of the greatest parts, I think, about being in a Betrayal and Beyond group is because you're not only starting to understand what you need to feel safe, but also what does it mean for you to be emotionally stable as a parent so that then you can, even on those days where maybe you're going to, you cry just what appears for no reason. There is a reason, but you're crying kind of for no reason. But then you can actually work through that and process that. And so it really does, I think, help with even at the beginning so that you're taking all the right steps and that you're even looking forward to that couple hours a week that you can spend with the other women in your group because they're going through the same exact thing that you're going through. And of course, your leader or your co-leader, they have already gone through the process. They're several steps ahead of you, which can be so helpful to just navigate the early stages of being a mom and being a betrayed partner.
I remember Waylon used to always say, he used to call mine and John's groups man group and woman group. Like, oh, Daddy's going to his man group. It's like they didn't know what we were doing, but they knew we were going to these groups. And they probably just figured it was like a Bible study or something. But that was one of the things you talked about, just like having a day where you're crying, where early on, it's like I just tried to press through. Like I need to get up and do all the same things with my kids. And that's where I was stuffing things. And so my anger would come out sideways on the kids or on whoever. I'd be snappy. And then when I started letting myself, like a couple years into our recovery, John had a relapse, like a really bad relapse. And I just allowed myself, it was like 3 days where I was like, I just want to lay in bed and I want to cry and I want to eat ice cream and I want to watch TV. And I probably was texting you, and that's what I needed. And so instead of trying to like power through and function in my normal capacity of making meals and playing the games after dinner, my kids knew I was sad. And my boys were teenagers. The twins were teenagers. So they knew that John had relapsed with porn and lied about it. And it was so sweet to see the way that even my one son, who's not as like emotionally like talkative, he just came and he just like rubbed my leg. He's like, I'm sorry, Mom. And I was like, that was so sweet. It was teaching them like, this is what real life looks like. And then my other son was like, I know that John messed up, but I also know he loves you and he's very sorry. And it's like, I want my kids to see real life in our house. And then with the little ones, John had said, they were a little older, so they were probably 7 and 8 or something like that, or maybe closer to 10. And John had said, well, I lied to Mommy and it really hurt her feelings. And doesn't it hurt your feelings when your brother lies to you and does something mean on purpose and hurt you? And, and then, yeah. And he's like, well, it's kind of what I did, like Mommy and Daddy have struggles too. And she's really upset. And so we're just gonna give her space. And that was so much better because no anger came out sideways on my kids rather than just like trying to power through.
Yeah. And that's the nice thing too about having those couple safe friends that that you can just text and say, this is what's happening. I need a couple days. But they're also the ones that then are going to continue to check on you and just make sure, okay, how are you today? What are you doing today? Are you staying healthy? Are you staying safe? Are you not going in your head too much by yourself, those kind of things, because sometimes it is because a lot of times when relapse happens, then we end up, for the betrayed partner, it takes us sometimes back to the beginning. Right. Not that we're going to stay in the beginning, but sometimes our brain and our pain and everything that we felt the first time that disclosure or discovery happened, all of those feelings come to the surface, which can be very overwhelming. And so just to give yourself time to say, I know that this is what I'm feeling right now and it's legitimate, but it's also not going to last as long as it lasted the first time. And so I just need to reach out to people, do what I need to take care of myself so that I can take care of my kids.
Yeah. And sometimes it's not true, but sometimes when you experience a relapse down the road like I did, you actually feel like you can feel even worse because now you're saying, well, we had all the tools, we did the group, and we're still here, so it's never going to change. And that is such a lie, that it does not have to stay that way. But it was pretty devastating to experience a relapse down the road after the initial discovery. And so like you're saying, when that happened with me, I'm pretty sure I just texted you like, hey, I'm not doing good. I don't want to talk about it right now. Just letting you know where I'm at. And to be able to just have that net and then give yourself the space and not try to do all the same things. Like you don't have to go to church and put on the smile or whatever. You can say, I just need some time to myself. I need to go to a hotel and just get out of this environment for a few days and or whatever, works for you. So leading in, I kind of talked about our kids and how we explain things, with relapse and betrayal to the kids. But the question specifically we have next is, how much do I share with my kids? And you've talked about this in conferences that our kids can feel what's going on.
Yeah.
And I remember when we first started, I think we were a year into the process of recovery, and we're sitting at the dinner table and we're like, okay, well, who wants to pray? So if we were a year, like the boys would have been 10. They're 7-ish years older than Ayla. So she was probably 4 at that time. And Ayla prayed. And she was like, Dear Jesus, help Daddy to not lie. I was like, ooh, that's the Holy Spirit speaking. But we had thought we did not know where she got that because we were like, we don't talk about this in front of her. But obviously she picked up the tone. She picked up the little, probably micro expressions and little things that go on in the house that made her know something was off. Maybe she did overhear a conversation, but just saying that they hear it, they feel it, they know something's off. And in those years, if we were even like talking in a low tone, she would come in and be like, don't fight. I don't want you guys to fight. Because after that first explosion of discovery and trauma, she was like, had hyper senses, of things going on. And so we really realized that we need to tell them things on their level of what they can understand. So the way that John articulated, like, I hurt her feelings, I lied. I think when Waylon was about 8, John had said, I lied to your mom. And he's like, were you looking at inappropriate images on the computer? Like, that's a phrase we use in the house. And he's like, yes, so and they'll start to ask more questions. Like Waylon now was at the age where he could ask that question, even though we've given him kind of age appropriate information along the way.
Yeah. And it really is so true that even if your kids don't know exactly what is going on in the house, they can feel it. They can feel the tension because it's always part of our survival. I mean, our brain was created that way so that we know when there's danger in our environment, and children are very, very perceptive. And the other thing to keep in mind too is that if you don't give your kids information that they can understand that's age appropriate for them, they're going to make up their own story.
Glad you're talking
and
about
so that. Because we don't want them ever feeling like the reason why mommy's crying so much or that daddy isn't living at our house anymore is because I've done something wrong or I've done something bad, or you know what I mean? Because kids are going to just developmentally, they're going to process their world that way in kind of a little bit of a self-focused way. And we want to make sure that they know enough about the truth so that we're helping them create a narrative that makes sense to them and that they're not taking that on as children, because that just isn't, it's not going to benefit them in the long run for sure.
Yeah, this is an important conversation that we could probably have more episodes just around this topic, because I know that if you're a mom and you have kids and you've gone through betrayal, it's really important to you to know how to navigate this. But, if we could just, emphasize anything, it's just allow yourself to have space and time and grace to heal and be present in your feelings so that you can process them fully and deal with them in the moment and not have to carry them on and on and on.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us for this conversation. If we can think about it, we should be talking about it. So please send us your questions. Send it to unfiltered@puredesire.org. If you found this episode helpful, share it with your friends and make sure to subscribe.